Hello and welcome to the Whosoever Book Club. We're so glad you've joined us. If you're joining us for the first time, Whosoever is a group of Salvationists who believe strongly that the Bible sets the truth and foundation of God. And one of the things we do is a book club where we look at various different books. Now, unfortunately, this month, we don't have any guests with us. Everybody was busy, but I still wanted to bring you an installment, so I'm afraid you're stuck with me. I hope that's all right. And this past month, we've been reading C.S. Lewis's Pilgrims Regress. C.S. Lewis, for anybody who might not know, is a well-known academic. He was a professor in English literature, but he came to faith a bit later in life. And this, in fact, the book that we're looking at now, Pilgrims Regress, is actually the first book he wrote after becoming a Christian. So what are the themes that really come out of this? Obviously, there's a huge theme. You probably have picked up that Lewis is trying to write something, almost an updated version of Pilgrim's Progress. And in so doing, he's trying to tell his own story, his own journey to faith. So the whole idea, obviously, faith plays a big part of it. But you also get other themes going alongside that, the idea of faith and the idea of seeking happiness or seeking joy and the things that bring us joy. And it's almost like it's a journey where he starts out with a bad image of what faith is, what Christianity is about, and he sees something that brings him a lot of joy. He wants to pursue it. He's not quite sure exactly what it is, but he knows that it gives him a feeling. And actually, what he finds out in the end, not to give the book away, what he finds out in the end, that actually it is faith. It is that relationship with the creator that they call the landlord in the book that is actually the thing that is the joy that he's been searching all this time. And as the book progresses, he goes through and he's kind of on this journey, this pilgrimage to discover or to find this island, which is representative of what he sees as being the true source of joy. And he comes across a lot of different ideas, a lot of different philosophies. So philosophy is a huge element with this in this book. And I think one of the things that really stuck out to me, or that worked for me anyways, we're not quite there yet, but one of the things that did work for me was that he kind of uses these different characters in the narrative to explore kind of philosophical ideas. You know, most people probably don't really engage with philosophy on any kind of deep level, even though they might be impacted by those ideas at work in the world. But he kind of, by personifying them in characters, he's able to bring them a bit more alive. And he engages with these different people along the journey, and they each have something to say about his pursuit of joy, what he's looking after. And they speak into their views of religion. They try and express their own views as to why religion really is folly. I found that really interesting, because on the back of that, there's times where you can really see John thinking, oh, yeah, this is the right thing. but only really to discover through different experiences and meeting different people the downsides or the incompleteness that these things offer. So this book is going to be heavily um, very allegorical, very imagery based. So if you are reading it, read it, enjoy it as a story, but as much as you can, try and just pick out what all these images are trying to say. Some of the other themes that come through as well is the danger of intellectualism, kind of rationalizing everything to the nth degree, in how he's not saying rationalism is wrong. I think anybody who probably has come across C.S. Lewis will know that he is an intellectual himself, but he kind of has become aware that rationalizing and intellectually picking everything apart doesn't ultimately land you up actually in the place where you want to be, that there has to be a mix between your intellect as well as what he refers to as romanticism. So that is the idea of the passions, and that you should be passionate about something, that you engage your emotions and your feelings as well, rather than purely being just based on the intellectual, that there has to be a mix of the two for faith to be what it should be. I think also I found it really interesting as well how he deals with, I suppose, where a lot of people today kind of, when they're looking at the meaning of life and the purpose of life, where most people start, which is in the kind of the physical, the sensual pleasures. And there's a whole character there in which he engages with in a sexual way and looking for gratification kind of in the flesh. And I think that's so apt for today, where a lot of our world is based around kind of trying to not just get joy, but it's got to be instant joy, instant gratification. So we see this in everything from the way we portray sex, and how sex has become something that actually, it's there for pleasure. So don't worry about the commitment side, don't worry about the love side, don't worry about the thing that might actually bring sex any kind of deeper and lasting meaning. Just enjoy the physicalness of it. And even as well around food, like fast food is like an instant gratification thing, isn't it? No, I'm as guilty as anybody. But how people look to these things to find joy, and actually in the end they just have to look for more and more and more, because what they find is what they have doesn't fulfill them. He meets a lot of different characters in here. So one of the other main characters that you'll come across in the book is Mr. Virtue. And I've got to put my hands up. I totally didn't realize until I was doing a bit of reading after I'd read the book, that actually Mr. Virtue is supposed to be part of John himself. He's supposed to be like, so John is the romantic side of John, the passionate side, where Mr. Virtue is the sensible side, the rational side, who takes all of that to an extreme. And his character portrayed is that actually meaning is not required. What is required is that you act virtuously. So you come across characters. Some of the characters, I'm just looking here. So some of the characters. So the landlord, they talk about the landlord. The landlord is the representation of God. And within this book, you get this really interesting story, basically a creation story, but it's all done within the context of the universe of this book rather than our own universe. And that's really interesting, that the landlord is a farmer, and he farmed the land, and then he decided he would bring in tenants. In other words, he decided to create humanity, and he brought them in, and that basically they ate fruit. Yeah, that's right from Genesis, isn't it? they ate heavenly fruit that they weren't ready to have because they weren't yet living with the landlord in the castle, so which is heaven. So you get the landlord, then you have this idea. John has this concept of the island, and the island is almost a character of himself. And the island represents his pursuit of truth, his pursuit of joy, everything that there is good in this life. For John is represented by this island. And it's interesting because actually later on in the book, when John meets, I think it's History, when John meets History, the character History in the book, he starts to explain how actually for other people, it's not an island. For some people, it would be some other representation, either the sound of a seashore or the coast, seeing the ocean, or things like that. But they were all based within each individual person's personality. So they're all leading to the same place. They all lead back to the landlord, back to God. But God uses different imagery and different things to talk to the people at that time because it's relevant to them. So you also have Mr. Enlightenment. So he is an allegory. He's representing kind of the 19th century rationalism. And actually, it's interesting how they do, because there's like the first Enlightenment and kind of second Enlightenment. And this is represented by him having two different wives, and how his relationships with these two different women change him. And then, of course, there's the spirit of the age. And for Lewis, that was representing kind of the literary movement and Freudianism. And there's this scene in the book where John is he's trapped by this giant. He's been taken captive, and he's trapped by the giant. And the giant, every time the giant looks at you, you become transparent. And it's that argument of kind of reducing everything to its base parts. So, and the horror and the difficulty that John has to come to think that all I am is organs, and all I am is flesh, and all I am is the blood and the intestines and the things. And actually he comes to learn, he escapes. He finds it really difficult, but he escapes. And then, people are able to help him that, these might be your constituent part, but that's not the whole of who you are. We have brains, we have feelings, we have thoughts that make us who we are as well. And it really looks at the idea of, what is the real? Is the real only our physical component parts, or is the real actually also found in our spirituality and our experience of God? Anyways, there's an old lady that represents Christianity. And so John journeys along this path. Eventually, he comes basically to the end of the physical world. And there's a huge crack in the ground, which was created symbolically by sin coming into the world when the humans ate the heavenly fruit that they weren't supposed to eat. And it created this division between God and the people, the landlord and the tenants. And him and Virtue are trying to find a way. Mother Kirk, that's her name. And they come across Mother Kirk, and they say to her, do you know how to get over? She said, there's only one way over, and that's on my back. And I need to carry you. And these two young guys are looking at her thinking, there's no way you're going to carry us over. So there's a whole other narrative where they're going along this fissure. The north represents what we might consider conservatism. And then the south represents what might be considered liberalism today. And you come across other characters so one character who is actually meant to be like a vicar character, but he represents the modern church, and he has these conversations with John where he's kind of saying, we've got to look at the world and we've got to move with the times of the world, and that's what's important, and we need to let's leave behind all our old-fashioned ideas about the landlord and all that kind of stuff, and let's embrace what's coming now and the new and all that kind of stuff. I suppose to just break this bit of it down, basically he comes across a couple of other characters, Mr. Sensible of Wisdom, who and what's interesting, I think, when you meet some of these characters, especially the characters close to the end, when they share with John, you're reading and you can see they've got part of the story. They got part of the truth. It's not that everything Lewis doesn't make it look like everything these characters are saying is wrong. But eventually you see that as those ideas are taken then to their extremes, to their fulfillment, that actually they're not quite complete. They're not enough. And John kind of comes to this realization that they're not quite enough, and he starts to become quite uncomfortable, tries to start to escape, but in the end he's pushed forward. He's pushed forward by truth, which is represented by a woman knight actually, who pushes him forward along the path, and he meets history. And history is able to give him a greater understanding of how the ideas of the landlord have progressed, and how the landlord or God has tried to engage with all these people at different times. And at different times, they've been successful, but that after a period, the evil of the world or the enemy in the world would find a way to corrupt that truth. And yeah, I suppose a lot of Christians today probably feel that way about where the church is now. You know, there seems to be a lot of corruption of truth. The whole question of what truth is actually been thrown up in the air over the last few years, hasn't it? Where we're being told that we can kind of make our own truth, and that my truth is not the same as your truth, but it doesn't mean that both aren't true. But the reality is that by definition, truth is exclusive. It's either true or it's not true. You can't have two opposing views and them both be true. And that's not to say that we don't realize that the world is complex and that God works in really amazing ways. We only have to look in scripture and see that God went to all sorts of people and engaged in all sorts of situations that the people of the time there thought, well, that obviously can't be from God, because, those, and, we can't deny that. But equally, there are base truths about who God is, and his truth that remain true. And we do reach out and we do engage in these places. We should, where yeah, there might not be the same kind of people that we find in the church, but we do that in a way with love and compassion, in the way that Jesus did, to let them know that they're loved so they can know him better. And as we know him better, like the character John, as we come to a greater understanding of who God is and our purpose and what he wants, our perspective starts to change. Our perspective and the way we act and what we do and what we think is right and what we think is wrong, all of that becomes transformed. And that's what God wants for everybody. So what worked and what didn't work? The narrative really worked for me. I really enjoyed how Lewis tried to do this through a story, rather than trying to kind of write a really intellectual argument. Don't get me wrong, there are times I do enjoy a really good intellectual argument, but actually I think he's trying to make it slightly more accessible by doing it through a story format. And I would say, this is his first attempt at doing it, so it's not as It's not as refined as you might find in the Narnia Chronicles, which a lot of people might have read as children or like me as an adult. So those things become much more refined by the time that he starts writing in there. The way that he's putting in the way the allegories work. In this book, the allegories, they really stick out. They really hit you. But yeah, by doing it through a story rather than an intellectual book, that really helps. In terms of perhaps what didn't work so much for me, sometimes the allegories, as good as they are, sometimes they get a bit confusing. That's why I said, this is his first attempt, and he refines it much more by the time we get to the Chronicles of Narnia. But so sometimes you kind of need to read this book, and you need to kind of have your phone beside you so you can Google some of this stuff, just so other people who've read it can kind of let you in on some of the things, just so you're totally understanding not just who the character is, but actually what the idea that they fully represent and what they're trying to say. And the other thing I would say, anybody who's going to read this book, you've got to read the book and realize that this was written at a different time. So there's a lot of stuff he talks about. One of the characters that features in it is brown girls. And obviously that term for us rings certain bells. Now, in terms of what he was actually trying to say, I've read some people criticizing him, saying he was being racist, and then I've heard other people saying actually he wasn't trying to do that at all. So I'll leave that one alone for now. But just be aware that there may be things in there that you just kind of grate with kind of where we are today and the way that we would use language, perhaps more carefully than that particular example. But overall, it's a really, really good book. I would really, if you haven't read it already, I really hope you go out and you pick it up and you give it a read. I hope. Forgive me if I've been a bit confusing. I know our discussions with somebody else tends to be maybe a little bit more ordered or flow a little bit more. So forgive me if my thoughts are a little bit more all over the place this time. In terms of what I would do differently, having read the book, I think for me, it is trying to work towards that balance between being open to the spiritual, or as he's calling it, the romantic, the passionate, the things that really set your heart on fire in terms of faith, and the rational side of things, that it's based in a foundation, that it's based on a truth. So I would say I'll try and have a bit more of that balance. I've got to admit, I tend to lean a bit more towards the rational. I tend to be a person that likes things that are ordered. And if things feel less ordered or less under control, they can seem a little bit more frightening to me. But that doesn't mean that that's not God. There's lots of stuff we can read in the Bible that happened that just seemed to be, if you were there, must have just felt absolutely crazy. But it's God's power at work, isn't it? It's I suppose, going back to Lewis, it's that idea that he portrays in the Narnia books where the children, when they meet Aslan and they're saying, is he safe? And they say, well, no, he's not safe. He's a wild lion. God, we can't contain God. I'm not saying God is out there and he's going to start killing people or whatever, but God can be dangerous if we don't show him the right amount of respect and appreciation for who he is. So having that balance between allowing myself to be open to God doing grander, more wonderful things, but also being held fast in the firm foundation of his truth, so that in those moments, if there's something that actually is not of God that seems to be trying to pull in a certain direction, that your rationalism can stop you from getting too carried away. So I hope you've really enjoyed the book this month. I hope you continue enjoy listening. Please leave us some comments. Let us know what you think. You know, we're still in early days in doing this. We hope that you like it. If you do like it, please subscribe, like and subscribe it so that you'll be aware when new content comes out. Next month, I've got Tim Swansbury coming back. If you'll remember him from our very first episode. And Tim will be joining me, and we're going to be looking at Gospel Conversations by Major Phil Layton, who is a Salvation Army officer. And that's looking at basically at Christian apologetics. So we're really looking forward to looking at that book, and we hope you'll get a copy. It can be found on Amazon. And I just hope you read along, and I hope you're getting some blessing from our time that we're spending here. So thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye.